This is just going to be kind of like a part two video, and I'm just going to kind of talk about a little bit of history on the WR. Um, it's hard to say actually what is 100% what a WR should look like, or what is correct for a WR, or, because there was different variations of that model of bike. There was the actual factory sponsored factory rider that got a factory machine specially built and set up at the factory, and sponsored by a Harley racing team. Those bikes were different. Then you had your dealer sponsored riders would get a similar machine to the factory sponsored riders, but there was some differences. And then you also had your guy who had enough money and maybe knew the right people, could go down to his local dealer and order one himself. And then you also had the guy who basically bought all the parts over the counter and kind of put his own bike together. And then you also had your Class C bikes, which were not actual WRs, but more so hot rodded and modified 750cc model bikes. So there is a lot of variations there. And on top of that, each rider set his bike up differently. Each race shop or race team would set their bike up differently. And then depending on which tracks you were racing at, the bike would be set up differently. And WRs basically started hitting the scene, I believe, kind of right before World War II, and really kind of had their heyday right after World War II, and then up into the early 50s where the last WRs were made, because they were starting to get a little bit outdated, and compared to some of the British bikes that were starting to come over in that scene. But a lot of riders still rolled their WRs in competition, through the 50s into the 60s, and even a lot of people are still racing them in competition to this day. They were also used, modified and used for hill climbing as well. So it's hard to say what actually that's correct or that's not correct, or that's how it should be and that's not how it should be, because there's not like one model of this is what it's got to be or it's not that. So it's pretty much basically just a hot rod bike, and can be set up more so how the rider wants it set up, but there is certain guidelines of what needs to be there and what shouldn't be there. Now this front end is basically more or less your standard. This is a real 48 front end, and the springs and everything on the front of the fork was chromed by somebody in the past. And these are real speedster bars. These are from the 40s as well, the Harley Davidson. And these would be seen on some WRs, some racers like these. They're a little bit wider. Otherwise, some racers went with this style bar. These are real as well. And you'd run these style of a bar with like a dog bone riser, which was what was on this bike when we bought it. And then this front end right back here is a I-beam front end, which would have been seen on some WR. Some riders preferred that style. That actually came off of a race machine and set up to handle better taking left turns on the dirt track. But that would be more like a late 30s racer. And the wheels that are going to be going on the bike are going to be a 18-inch, like how we see in this picture, but I'm going to be running black. The rim will be black with CAD spokes, and then Firestone Repop flat track tires are going to be going on those wheels. So once I get those done, it's a pretty expensive venture just for the wheels and tires for this bike, because you can't buy what I want already put together. So you have to buy and find all the separate pieces and then lace them up yourself and then have the tires mounted. And the color of the bike's going to be kind of a competition orange, like in that photograph over there. That's more like a tangerine orange. So there also was different model Harleys that you could buy at that time from the factory, like the WLDR, which was basically a street version of the WR, and had a similar top end to the WR like you see on this bike, but more of a standard 45 bottom end. And it was kind of a mentality of somebody that wanted a street hot rod, or you could strip it down, take it to the track, enter it in a Class C, and race it as well. So this bike is going to be kind of not set up as a true factory machine, but set up somewhere in between a Class C racer and a Class A racer. But about 90% of this bike is correct and is all original pieces. There's I had going with a couple reproduction pieces just because finish quality on them is going to be nicer than trying to find the original piece in the same condition. So but I'd say at least about 90% of the bike is original Harley Davidson pieces. Especially basically the entire engine is all real deal. The tranny will be all real deal. The tanks, fender, or not the fender, the frame, fork, bars, the brake setup, most of the components on the wheels will be. And then as far as the front hub goes, that again is different because some people, most WRs just ran a spool hub in the front, but some people also ran the stock brake drum hub and then just ran it as they just basically gutted all the brake stuff out of it and ran it open. So I don't know, just kind of like how this one's. We got some brakes in here now, but it'll be. This is the rear sprocket, but it'll be open like that in the front, which is how I'm doing it. I have another original hub that's not laced to a wheel. These aren't the seat springs that I'm going to use. I've got some original ones I'm going to use. Here's all my transmission stuff, gear, everything for the train. Those are brake shoes. Those are original World War II surplus brake pads. And then some different exhaust brackets and stuff. And then I have a few boxes of original CAD spokes and stuff. So like I said again, I'll make another video once I make a little bit more progress on it. But I hope I've informed somebody on a little bit more history of the WR.